move on in, let me introduce our three brilliant speakers who are with us here today. Right beside me is labor rights activist and scholar Winnie Ng, who holds the CAW Sam Gindin Chair in Social Justice and Democracy at Ryerson University. She began her labor involvement in 1977 as a union organizer with the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. Ladies and gentlemen? Oh! And it's the year that I was born, which I thought was just fascinating. Oh my gosh, 1977 was the best year ever. I'm biased. Beside Winnie is Sonia Singh, who is an organizer with the Workers' Action Center, a worker-based organization committed to improving the lives and working conditions of people in low-wage and unstable employment. Sonia? Go on. And last but absolutely never least is Judy Duncan, who founded ACORN-Canada over 8 years ago in August 2004. And under her management, the organization has now grown to over 51,000 members with 4 offices across the country. Pretty impressive. Judy Duncan. So this is our opportunity to really build on the panel that led the day off for us, to talk about how do we go beyond simply engagement, and how do we go beyond engagement to organizing and mobilizing with diverse low-income communities, where it's community members who actually amplify their own voices and share their own stories and experiences. And so to start us off with a bit of context and to get us going, we're going to start with Winnie, who is going to share her reflections on her years of organizing experiences, again, just to be able to set that context for us. So Winnie, please.
All right. Thank you very much, Effie, and thank you for being here with this conversations. And I'm going to start off just sharing some of my own learnings, and sometimes it's very much sort of learning from what we didn't do, in retrospect. And if you take a look at, I guess part of it is saying, this is very familiar graphic for a lot of you. And what we are trying to do is trying to reverse the trend and saying, in this climate of austerity where workers are being divided between union and non-union, where communities are being divided, where everyone is sort of racing, competing for the crumbs, how do we reverse the trend? How do we mobilize and chase after the big fish? Right? So it's in that sense, I want to just set I think some of it has been mentioned by the panel speakers earlier, and trying to set the trend sort of, if we take a look at community engagement in a spectrum, then from engagement to mobilizing takes on the sense that you want people to not just involved, you want people to be empowered. And that whole sense of people, the 3 key words, people, power, change. And for us as organizers, as community activists, working with members on a daily basis, how do we organize the people so they feel they have the power to make the change they want to see in the community? And so it's in that transformations, it's pushing the frame too and saying, for the community activists, for the community members, be them workers to tenants to service users, right? It's how do we shift the conversations that they are not at the margin, but shifting into the center. And even though in recognizing the structural inequality that we are most often, due to the different equity lenses, we are being relegated to some space prescribed in the sandbox. How do we change that rules of engagement so we can reclaim and center our own voices? And the other piece is also, I guess part of that from engagement to mobilizing, it's also mobilizing in looking at, rather than seeing the immediate problem, as the only issue at hand. It's linking it, questioning, and for all of us, in engaging folks in questioning, taking on, looking deeper, probing deeper in the underlying issues, creating the oppositions, and challenging the status quo. You know, part of what, I mean, with the funding arrangements that have been done right now, the voice for advocacy and the voice for dissent is shrinking. And how do we use our own capacities, use our own different labels to push that frame open a bit more, create more space so we can take on some of these issues, and rather than just keep taking it and keep taking it. And I guess part of that whole mobilizing is coming from a place that if we can envision and reimagine what another healthy community, a safe workplace could look like, then how can we strategize and plan to get there, from here to there? And so in that sense, it's engaging and mobilizing folks and letting them to be have that total ownership of the whole process, that they are the ones who decide and they are the ones who map out the strategy. So in that sense, it's a much more fundamental, much more meaningful changes. And the next piece that I like to raise is, rather than focusing on issues, I mean, very often in various communities, we get so boxed in our own issue silo, right? And how do we create that sense of movement building that it's based on values, right? If you're talking about living wage campaign or minimum wage campaign, it's pushing it in a sense that it's not, I'm not asking it because I'm greedy, I need more, but it's from that lens that poverty hurts everyone. Or if when we do the good jobs for all coalitions, when we're going out trying to save the cleanest jobs in the public sector, and we are saying poverty wages hurts the community. And what's wrong with people having a living wage? And so in that sense, it's framing it as under the whole auspices of respect, and that notions that we need respect and dignity and justice in workplaces. So it's shifting and switching, moving into values. Because part of it is also recognizing that earlier Dina talks about relationship, and Deborah talks about relationship building. Part of that relationship building needs to come from the heart. We need to connect by the stories, sharing the stories. It's need to connect right over here at the heart. And that's where the core values are found. Because once you build the relationship, then you build the commitment for each other, and then you move from having the story of I to a story of we. And in that sense, and in my years of activism and the organizing, nothing is it's more powerful than hearing a union member or a community resident saying, shifting from saying I to saying we. And so it's in that sense the making of we. How do we take into account all the different multiple diversities and identities of the members, the workers that we're working alongside with? We're trying to create that power base. It's how do we recognize people's inner resources? How do we recognize people's courage and resilience? And above all, recognizing that we are all starting at different space and have different challenges. And so in that sense, it's trying to move also from the politics of fragmentations, right? Moving it from the politics that politicians like us to be in, the whole divide and rule tactics, and the whole politics of division and fear, into a whole politics and the vision of solidarity and community building. Wrap up. Okay. And then I guess at the last point is saying, You know, when we talk about people power change, at the end of the day, our power comes from the people. And how do we harness that? How do we make sure that we maximize that power base to create the meaningful change for social justice? And to me, those are the three pieces that needs to go together. Thank you.
Fantastic. And, you know, hopefully, and in other circumstances, we could listen to Winnie talk for hours, and she has so much to share. And so hopefully you can get a hold of Winnie after this session, because I think a lot of what she has shared is that context of the work that we need to be doing, and many of us are doing. And so two great examples of that work that is happening with Workers' Action, is happening with ACORN, and that people power change concept, but also that foundation that's there and how we go from the I to the we is really important. And so Sonia and Judy are here to share some of what they do and their experiences. And so they're going to walk us through a couple of their campaigns, or their current or past campaigns, helping us understand how, when we're looking at this about people in their own interest and in their own voice, how do issues get identified? How do issues become a priority, and who speaks to the issue and gives voice to the campaign? And so maybe we will start with Sonia, and then we'll hear from Judy.
Great, so just...
Nope. Do we have a clicker? Sorry.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Clicker's the technical term?
Thank you. So, thank you very much for that intro, and it's always amazing to hear from Winnie and the amazing experience that she brings, but it's also so great to be on this panel with these amazing folks who I admire and respect so much, but also looking around the room and seeing all of the organizers and community activists that are just here right in this space. So we have a lot to learn from each other. I wanted to walk through in our first round of questions the beginning of a campaign and a really practical way that we set about defining both the issue but also the targets and the strategies that we were going to use. And then I think in the second part, we'll talk more concretely about some of the things we're doing right now, and I'm going to ask Lorraine, one of our members, just to help introduce a few of those pictures as well. So looking at our Stop Wage Theft campaign, which some of you may know a little bit about, where did we start? So we wanted to build from experiences, both experiences that we had at the Workers' Action Center on our phone line, answering calls, getting questions from people around the city, but also with our members and with our organizing committees. So at the Workers' Action Center, we already have a structure of membership and people that sign up mostly through our phone line to get involved in activities in the center, and that's really the base of where we start when we're starting to build a campaign. We did focus groups at the beginning of the campaign with language within members that spoke a certain language, within our organizing committees, and we really just tried to map it out. What are the top issues facing you and your community around rights at work? What are the things that you're hearing about, that you're facing? What do you think the focus of the campaign should be? And also, really importantly, what do you think of where we've got so far? So we could kind of evaluate, we've been doing this for a little while, what is resonating with people? What victories do people feel like we have already won, or are they even registering at all? Is it just in our heads that we're moving this forward? With that, all of that information that we gathered from the focus groups and those conversations, we went through a collective process of then identifying some key demands. These are the things that we want to work on. These are the changes we want to see. But I think really important in terms of Winnie's point of mapping a strategy to get to that vision of where we want to go, it also included a mapping of power. Who are the targets that are going to help us win these changes? In our case, we know we need legislative change. We need the law to be changed. It's the Ministry of Labour, it's the Premier, it's the Cabinet of Ontario who are our targets. what are the strategies that are going to move those targets? So in our organizing committees, we really hashed out those discussions to come up with ideas of how could we see a campaign moving out. And a big part of it was testing the language, going out there. Does wage theft work? Does it mean anything to you? Does it mean anything to your family members and your community? We decided that it did resonate, it did work, and that was the frame that we picked. We basically said, you know, we've been hearing about these issues for years. When employers don't pay our wages, let's call it what it is. Let's call it theft and move outwards from there. So our demands, which I won't go over in a lot of detail, basically we need changes to the law. We need the law updated. We need the law to be enforced. We need a minimum wage that brings workers out of poverty, and we need to make sure that there is protection for all workers, regardless of their immigration status. Those were the demands that came out of those discussions. So where do we go from there? So one of the things that I think is really important that we've seen in building campaigns is to have opportunities to build skills and practice them right away. And one way that we did that was to develop a survey and do training with members to get out there and really map that this issue is happening across the city and across Ontario, so that members themselves could be part of that research process of documenting these trends. Our survey results were really, for us, showed the magnitude of the issue and is what we used to launch the campaign. So the research helped form the basis of our research report, of our campaign framing, but we really also wanted to make sure that that was grounded in people's experiences, and that's kind of coming back to that process of mobilizing, that when people call our phone line, we offer support, we work together to take on an employer that hasn't paid wages, but we also are in a really lengthy process of encouraging that person to not stop there. When they get their money, get involved in the center, become a member, and possibly share their story. So when we launched the campaign, our research results were grounded in an organizing campaign that we were doing at the time around a particular employer that was repeatedly violating the law again and again. And that company was hiring especially Spanish-speaking workers, and the story was on the front page of the Star, I think because it was grounded in that lived experience and people speaking out, saying, this is happening to me, this means that I can't pay my bills, this means that I had to declare bankruptcy and the impact on my family. That, just as a first launch, moved our target, that the minister had to respond. In some of the articles, our framing of the issue, wage theft, started to be the way that that the issue was being talked about. So we felt that that was, just even in launching, a way that we took over the conversation and said, this is what's going on, this is what we want to call it. Of course, it doesn't stop there, and in the second part, we'll talk about some more tools that we've been using, but we know this is our friends at the Stop, at one of their events, getting out there, building links with allies, getting out into communities, wherever we can, to be doing that outreach. We can't stop. We have a base of a certain number of members. We're not at the level of ACORN, which is absolutely amazing, but we know that that base building is so critical. As well as finding concrete victories along the way. So one of the ways that we do that is by involving members and community members when we are going to an employer that hasn't paid wages. So this is one photo of a Bad Boss Squad visit. And when we win someone's wages through one of those visits, we haven't won our massive campaign demands yet, but we're one step closer, and it's an example of showing how, when we work together collectively, we can see results. And the MPP strategy is what we'll talk about when we share some concrete tools. These are just some pictures from that.
Great, thank you. Please.
Thank you. So yeah, I'd like to thank my fellow panelists here. It's nice to be up here with both of you guys and Effie. So just to kind of quickly go over how ACORN's structured and how we work and how a membership organization moves a campaign forward is essentially we're structured like a community union. So we spend a huge chunk of our resources going door to door in low and moderate income neighborhoods and talking to people about what their biggest issue is, and then talking to people about how we actually make those changes and how individually it's really hard to move things forward, but collectively we have a voice. And so, so as an organization that's generally just for low and moderate income people, the staff doesn't choose the issues that we work on. We're really listening to our members and doing research with our members to try to figure out what the best campaigns are moving forward. And so, when we first started working in Toronto in 2004, when I first started working here, I didn't know a lot about Toronto. I'm from Winnipeg. I'd been living on the West Coast for a while. And so we just started door knocking based on research that we found from the United Way and other organizations. And going door to door and just asking people what their biggest issue is. And housing was a really huge issue. People were really upset primarily with maintenance requests in the building, pest infestations, elevators not working, security issues in the buildings, and I could go on. And so what we traditionally do is what we call an organizing drive, which takes place over a period of 2 months where we do a series of 5 community meetings. So every day we're going door to door, talking to people, building our lists. You can be a member at 3 levels. You can be a full member, which gives you voting rights in the organization, to electing our board. And that's a member that pays $10 a month. We also have provisional and associate members. A provisional member is just someone who supports the organization and wants to get involved, and an associate member pays something in between nothing and being a full member. So when we do our organizing drive, we're trying to get as many people to the meetings as possible, where we brainstorm all the community issues over a period of doing a meeting every week for 4 weeks, and brainstorming the issues, choosing short-term versus long-term goals. We don't want to try to take down the federal government with one chapter in Weston, but so we want to pick a target and a campaign that's appropriate to the size of the group. So, with this first initial drive, we targeted a couple local landlords that were being particularly negligent, and through working with the group there and putting together that first chapter, it became pretty apparent that the problem with a lot of the tenant issues in Toronto is not that there aren't laws with the municipal code, but the problem is that they're not enforced, and that the city doesn't have very good mechanisms to enforce their own municipal code. But the target that we wanted to choose was a very local, winnable target, because the model is based on showing people through doing that collective action actually works. So we don't necessarily want to try to change provincial housing policy with one chapter. We want to try to focus on something we can actually win. So we targeted the local landlords and won a bunch of repairs in buildings, which showed a lot of our members that getting together actually works. So once we'd done 3 organizing drives in the city and housing issues came up in all 3 of them, we then put together a citywide housing platform, which was focused on landlord licensing, which was talking to our members around, we don't want to fix this one building at a time, we want to fix this systemically, and let's try to get to the root of the problem. And so we really focused on trying to enhance the enforcement protocol at the City of Toronto. We had some big victories there with forcing them to implement a MRAB program, which was this proactive audit program, which then with the new City Council under Ford is kind of under a cloak of silence right now. So we're working with a couple allies on council to try to get them to put out the reports that they're supposed to be putting out to see where that program is at. But an important thing through all of this work is doing a lot of leadership development with our members, connecting local issues around problems with cockroaches in your building or whatever it might be to the larger policies. And we do weekend-long leadership development schools, brainstorming. It sounds much like what the Workers' Action Center does around who the target is and how do we actually move forward with these campaigns in a larger level. So I'm wrapping up right now. So just to finalize, the other way that we kind of, I have 2 minutes. That was a different wrap-up note. Okay, so we also, sometimes we hear things at every door, but sometimes we hear different things at different meetings that kind of come up consistently. And this is how we started working on our remittance justice campaign. And as everybody knows, so many people who move to Canada send a lot of money back to their friends and family at home. And a lot of people send through places like Western Union and MoneyGram, and it's a completely unregulated market. And so, to send $100 to Kenya, you're often paying like $15, $20. So it's like 15, 20%. So there's a huge gouge there in this unregulated market. And so, working with our national board and our provincial boards here, we came up with our Remittance Justice campaign, which is we're trying to cap the rate at 5% of the money being sent abroad, because there's actually a huge amount of money that could be delivered to friends and family back in countries outside of Canada, which when you take it out of the Canadian dollar is actually a lot of money. Globally, it's I think it's like over $4 billion moves around globally through the remittances, and the fees of that are around $44 billion in fees. So if that's like a 12% fee, take half of that is $22 billion. That's coming close to what like international aid money is globally. So it's a huge amount of money. It's unregulated. There's opportunity, and we've been working. We've got a private members bill introduced, but then it was killed with the provincial government proroguing. But it's about to be reintroduced again. So that's another exciting campaign, and I think I'll just wrap it up with that for now.
Brilliant. So as you can tell, we have a bit of a card system going on with some warnings and wrap-ups. But clearly what we're seeing is that when people are engaged, we see great things and great victories and the power that comes out. Really picking up on Winnie's point around people, power, and change, it's possible. I do want to also mention, because I know there are tenants in the crowd from Tenants for Social Housing, and I do really want to highlight that campaign because there is a group of tenants who have I've had the privilege of working with and supporting, but really a campaign where tenants have created their own campaign to go to the city and to Toronto Community Housing and to say it is not okay to sell even one home, when the city was talking about selling over 1,000 homes across the city, and which is ridiculous when we know there's not enough housing, affordable housing to begin with. Massive success there. Again, tenants talking to politicians, talking to their fellow tenants, talking to whoever will listen, really, and a massive success, I think, where over 90% of the homes were saved. And we're conscious of for now, because we know that campaign is still going and there still are forces at play, but really want to highlight the great work that Toronto Community Housing tenants are doing across a whole spectrum, but especially in Tenants for Social Housing. And so we know that the power is there, and we know that, that things are possible, but sometimes it can be overwhelming. It absolutely can be. And so to the wonderful panel, a helpful tool that people, if they're able to take a tool away today, something that you think that you can share with the group that has worked for you, that you've seen implemented as successful. And again, I do see hands up, so I do want just a friendly reminder, if you've got cue cards, please write your questions and we'll get to those in just a bit. So Winnie, do you want to start? And we're going to
I'll start and maybe bring the slide up. I guess one of the tools that I use from building from I to we, the making of we, is creating some sort of buddy system between those who are a bit more experienced to those who are just newly getting involved and getting active. And one of the pieces, I guess, from some of the community organizing and union organizing work, it's how to, the need to inoculate your activists. Before before you're taking them to meet and do a lobbying sessions or to be on the street for some street actions, you prepare them beforehand. You let them know what are some of the scenarios that could happen, so people won't get caught by surprise. Like, if it's taking on the management, we'll probably say, this is probably what's going to happen. They're going to start saying, trying to divide the group and bribe some of you and start, going heavy duty on the others. And so it's by the inoculations, as an organizer, you're actually giving people a sense that, so when they experience or confront the situations, they are not taken by surprise. And I think that calmed them down as well. And I guess the other piece, if I could just, we don't have time for that. Moving on, the other piece is, I guess I'm a bit much older compared to the rest of the panel here. I sort of have moved, like in the past as a younger organizer, I come, it's very much, I still have that fire in my belly. And I start from a place of, the place of rage and saying, we need to end the exploitation, so the anti-message. I guess that it's not that I'm older and being more soft, but it's saying also recognizing that to maintain that hopefulness, we need to start from a place of love. And that love is not, the relationship that we're building with each other. It's a communal, it's a building, creating a new community, an imagined community of love. And that sense of love actually gives us a more long-term view. Like, in my lifetime, I might not see employment equity in addressing some of the systemic discriminations, but whatever I could do, and I recognizing also that I'm walking on the shoulders of all those that have come before me, that whatever we are doing, as Dina earlier said, we are trying to open the door wider for those who come after us. And so in that sense, it's creating that you keep your courage and you keep that sense of solidarity, because it's, based on that notions that an injury to one is an injury to all. So in that sense, that the love is what makes sense. And now just quickly, the occupied, and I guess the last point, the labor movement has a formula on organizing. 1 + 1 = 3. Right? Saying, if I talk to Sonia is so gung-ho, and then she would talk to Judy. So it's 1 + 1 = 3. But I'm pushing the challenge to all of you that it's 1 + 1 equals much more than 3 if we want to mobilize and create a movement that we want to see. And this is, I would say, 1 + 1 = 11. So thank you.
That's the kind of math I get. Sonia?
Okay, great. So I just wanted to invite Lorraine, who's a Workers' Action Center member, to come up just to describe the slides that are in the second PowerPoint. Oh, there they are. Okay, great. So we wanted to share a really, really concrete tool, which is a postcard that we've been using to build our campaign, the current stage of our wage theft campaign. So Lorraine's going to take it away.
Okay. Members and staff members went out on a postcard drive. We went to low-income neighborhoods, and we asked people to share their stories of wage theft, and we collected about 100 postcards from each kind of like 4 ridings, so it's like 400 postcards. And then last Friday we went to 4 MPs of the riding where those postcards came from, and we went in a group and took the postcards, 100 each, with a nice big figurine, and told them this is 100 people that were affected by wage theft in their riding, and that how important this issue is, a very important issue. I mean, if you don't get your paycheck, you can't even afford rent. Sorry. Okay. Hello. So we took them to the MPs to let them know that this is happening, and also that it's a very important issue, and to let them know that we're not going away, that we're coming back. And I just think it's a very important issue, and it was, postcard drives have been pretty successful for us, and they're a good tactic.
Great.
Okay. And don't forget the rally tomorrow, raise the minimum wage.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lorraine. I think just from that, this experience has showed us that having something very simple, like filling out 3 questions about your experience on a postcard, it gives members an excellent opportunity to practice speaking to people in their neighborhood. It's a really concrete evidence to an MPP that this is something that's happening in your area. And we were thinking on Friday, you know, we've got 100, we worked hard to get those 100, but 100 doesn't sound like very much. So how do we portray them as 100 stories? These are 100 families in your community, and we're gonna keep doing that every time we get another 100, so we don't wait till that magic number of 5,000 that some of our members were thinking, yes, we'll get 5,000 and then we'll take action. No, we're taking it bit by bit because we got to keep moving. And just the last tool, oops, I keep pressing the wrong thing. The last tool that, acknowledging Paulette, who's another member in the room, she said, a tool we have to talk about is food, that we can't talk about organizing without. How we bring members together through spaces where we can build community. So we try to do that at WAC, not just have events about our campaigns and our organizing, but also different kinds of member events every week that often include food and TTC tokens and other things that will bring people together that then we can connect them to the campaigns later.
Fantastic, thank you.
So there's a saying in organizing that actions are the lifeblood of organizing. So just to touch on what you said, tomorrow at noon at 400 University at the Ministry of Labor, you guys should all come out and join us because we're really fighting hard to raise the minimum wage to $14 now, indexed to inflation. So if people can come out, that's there's a flyer on the table out there and also being waved in the air there. So that's an important tool of organizing. Just quickly, you know, it's not really one magic bullet with this type of stuff. It's a bunch of things combined together with a lot of hard work. You know, talking to people and asking them what they care about versus canvassing based on what your research is an important tool. Keeping good lists of interested people or members or however the organization is structured so that you can dedicate time to sitting down and calling through all the people and making sure they know about what's going on and coming up and marking whether they say yes, no, or maybe. Doing reminder calls the day before an event is really important. Doing a lot of small group work, which is helping people, you know, have a voice and sharing their opinion, because people really only remember what they say. So you guys are not going to remember any of this. You know, as we move on in the last couple years, we've been getting a little better with sending out emails to our members to try to also engage them into our rallies and events that way. I don't think it's going to replace phone banking and talking and doing house visits with our member, but it certainly is a good opportunity to supplement, and with Facebook and Twitter and everything, just kind of reaching new to audiences with the work that we do.
Great, thank you. Some great tools that hopefully can work in the work that you're doing. We do want to make sure there's time for you to turn to your neighbor to the right, left, and across from you to engage each other in a quick, brief conversation. Please do that. Please have a conversation over the next 10 minutes. We will come back because we do have a bunch of questions. But if you could reflect on that one thing that you think, or two, because we like cheating and that's okay. A couple of things that you thought was compelling and that you could implement in the work or the organizing that you are doing. So if you could have those conversations with the folks at your table, some reflection, some sharing, and then we'll come back to the larger group and go through the questions. Great, thank you. Sorry, didn't even. Hi, everyone. So we're going to come back. If we can just get everyone's attention. I know everyone's had fantastic conversations, and so I move back. My apologies for having to interrupt such great conversations, but we do want to make sure we can get to at least some of the questions, and there have been some fantastic questions that have been asked, and so thank you for sharing and submitting them. We do, just in terms of a little bit of a time check, we do about 10 minutes together for this session, and then we're going to all stay in this room, welcome back the others, and do a bit of a wrap up with, what did we say, 5 great ideas that have been pulled together from today. So please stick around. So we're going to start with, again, my apologies that we can't get to every question. I know, my apologies. I think I heard someone gasp. But just to start off, and one of the cards was more of a comment, but the comment says, let's acknowledge that university students and second generations are doing great advocacy, and so I think we do need to recognize that a lot of the amazing work that happens, it's here, but it's also out there, and so really want to take maybe 2 seconds to applaud the work that everyone's doing and acknowledge that. So thank you for that comment. I think that respect needs to be shared. But we'll start with our first question for Judy. If the question is, have you engaged politicians? And in this current context of a fiscal deficit, how do you think they're actually going to listen?
Well, you know, my initial thought on that is corporate targets. You know, example is with our housing campaign with the city. We were just actually meeting with Janet Davis this morning and talking about it doesn't cost the city any more money to force landlords to repair their buildings. They just need to have some tools to be able to do it and create a fee structure that actually makes the bad landlords pay, make it cheaper to do the repairs than to pay the fines to the city. It's just a lack of good policy. It's not a burden on the general public tax base. So, you know, focusing on policies that don't necessarily cost money, they're just more about smart policy.
Great. It can be done. When they say it can't, we know it can be done. There were also, for Sonia, there were also a number of questions around the minimum wage. And so some of the things that I think we hear consistently is, no, we can't raise wages. We can't afford to have a livable wage. And that it hurts businesses, potentially small businesses, large businesses moving overseas. It's going to hurt our communities. Your comments on that?
So I'm really glad that question came up because it's something that we're hearing a lot, and as Winnie said, we really need to have answers to answer that sort of head on. And so what we, in sort of thinking, how do we respond to that when someone says, well, we can't afford to raise the minimum wage, as Effie said, that's going to cause job loss, it's going to put us further behind, it's going to have unintended consequences. Our response to some of those kinds of comments is to say, you know, we can either take it on in terms of what does it mean to actually bring dollars into our communities so that low-wage families, low-wage community members can have a little bit more spending power, that we know that our economy is driven by that kind of consumer purchasing, and that when we have a higher earnings, a higher salary, that money in low-wage communities is going to be spent in the community, predominantly in small businesses. So that's one way that we can kind of respond to that question. Another thing that we often hear is about job loss. And we know there was an article in Maclean's recently that was putting that forward of all of these studies. But when you look at the studies, really when people have done comprehensive analysis of what is the impact of raising the minimum wage on job loss, at the end of the day, employers like to scaremonger around that, but studies do not show that there are, a lot of studies show no impact or even benefits, or if there are any impacts, they are very, very small in scale. So we can use that, kind of throw the studies back out there, but I think at the end of the day, what we want to be talking about is a vision. Do we want to, as Winnie, coming back to Winnie's kind of, what is it that we're trying to move towards? Do we want Ontario to be a low-wage economy? That's the direction that we're moving, because we know that service jobs are increasing. It's the fastest area of our economy that's growing. We know that people earning the minimum wage has doubled in the last 10 years. Is that the direction that we want to go? Or do we want to be building sustainable communities where everyone can afford to have a decent life? And we think that the minimum wage should allow you to do that. So that's kind of where we come back to at the end of the day. There's one more stat you could throw out, that the majority of people earning minimum wage, in fact, are not working for small businesses. So that's another piece that we can talk about. So hopefully those are helpful. The coalition that's building this campaign, which includes ACORN, Mennonite New Life Centre, Social Planning Toronto, and a whole bunch of other organizations, we have a frequently asked questions document that we can share if you want to get some of those answers in your own hands.
Fantastic. And have you heard there's a rally tomorrow? I felt like I should mention it. In case you haven't, there are some sheets on your tables that will help direct you there. But just in case you didn't hear about it, want to make sure we can raise that. Thumbs up. Okay. One of the other questions that has been asked is, I've heard leadership, mentoring, and training a lot. Could you speak to how you train for this and what models potentially you use? So Winnie was going to start us off with that one.
Yeah, but just
please,
to add on what Sonia was saying, one of the most effective tools when we were trying to work on saving the cleaners' jobs at the City Hall, we actually enlist and reach out to beyond the usual suspect, and we got 100 academics that teach in Toronto, live in Toronto, to sign a letter, a public letter to Mayor Ford and all the city councillors. And when time comes, that type of mobilizing can also happen to using research, using academics to strengthen the case for the minimum wage as well, and the case for living wage. In terms of how I got involved, how I got trained for leadership, I guess in a sense, it was a baptism by fire. And earlier when I talked about that sense of rage, when you have that sense of rage and seeing all the injustice and the differential treatment by race, by gender, by disability, it turns the person to become fearless. And when you are not afraid, and along with others who are angry, that it creates a different type of solidarity and energy. And that's the mobilizing that makes all the difference. Yes, we need to do all the lobbying. We need to have advocates inside. But the advocates inside can't do anything unless we have mobilizing on the street. And henceforth, tomorrow at 400 University is the beginning of that.
In case you don't know.
But it's the other piece is now that I'm at the university, it's also trying to create that space where young people and a lot of students who are also juggling between jobs and study, in creating that space and saying, what can we do differently? And I guess part of that, in a sense, is to engage in critical dialogue and do it and part of it moving from rage to love, it's doing it from a much more compassionate sense and saying, we might not all have all the answers, but I would always remember one of the poems by Ernesto Cardenal. It's the path, it's made by walking. And we just have to keep doing it. It's okay to fall and trip, but that's the only way we can learn and get up and do it again. Because every time when we do it again, it will be better.
So we've unfortunately run out of time, and I think that's a fantastic place to run out of time at. And so I would like to thank Winnie and Sonia and Judy and yourselves as well for spending this hour together. I think we've shared a lot, we've learned a lot, and thank you so much. Thank you for your questions and your feedback. But please stick around. We are awaiting the other session to come in for wrap-up.
So hello everybody. We're at the end of our conference, and I'm just going to make some brief closing remarks so that I don't get in the way of what I know is the most important part of many conferences such as this, which is the getting to know you, getting to know each other. You don't know me. My name is Ratna Omitwar. I'm the president of the Maitree Foundation, which is also code for, thank you, kind of kid myself. I'm the president of the Maitree Foundation, and I work for Alejandra Bravo, who is right now at Here and Now, doing a media interview about the work that the kind of work that we talked about today. So I think it's good she's there, and you have to pretend I'm her. But I want to start off by wishing you all a very happy New Year. Today is March the 20th. In many parts of the world, spring is being celebrated today. Let's show a hand for the Iranians in the room. Nowruz Shoma Mubarak. I hope you have a wonderful New Year. And for those who are not Iranians, trust me, walk outside today. You'll feel spring, you'll feel renewed. I've been asked to thank all the presenters, but who I really want to thank is the fantastic team at Maitree that actually put this conference together. Yes. My colleagues Marco Campana, Stephanie Saunders, Katerina Vukobratovic, our colleague Vivian Gallegos, who came back with a baby to attend this conference and help out, even when she's on mat leave, and of course, the indefatigable Alejandra Bravo. I went on Twitter feed, and I'm very happy to know that there were a number of us tweeting. My tweets are not so great, but I try. But here's the interesting thing. The top trendsetter today was, I believe, budget. After that came Netanyahu. And then there was something else. And then there was collaboration. So we did well. We did really well. I don't know about you, but I always like to say that when I go to a conference, I have to come out with 5 good ideas. And so I'm going to tell you 5 good ideas, 5 good things, 5 amazing thoughts that I learned. And I want to encourage you to have your own 5 good ideas and 5 good thoughts and tweet about them or send them to us so we can compile them in some kind of way. So the first thing I heard, and this was from the panel that our ex-mayor with the community activists hosted, the first thing I heard is that when we do work like this, the work that involves grassroots activists taking leadership on change, not top-down leadership, but grassroots leadership, then it means we also need a different kind of leadership. And we often need leaders who are capable and have the capacity and the empathy to lead from behind, and sometimes from the middle. So the leader, the narrative, the North American, I think, narrative of the single leader at the front leading all his or her followers is not the leadership that we need for this kind of grassroots leadership. The next thing I heard, and I really do relate to it in a very intuitive way, that the service delivery paradigm will never create systemic change. In fact, I will suggest to you that the service delivery paradigm enslaves many community organizations. It prevents them from the engagement and the empowerment that we have heard of today from the Workers' Action Center, from PARC, and from other places. Again, we heard that engagement is important, but you have to have smart engagement. Engage with people in engaging ways, in different ways. I'm looking forward to hearing about the frozen $10 minimum wage being put in front of parliamentarians tomorrow. And, you know, I think that's a smart idea. We all have smart ideas, so let's really bring them to the fore. At the session I attended on digital media, and I'm not quite a Luddite. I think I'm a little bit there. I'm not quite a Luddite. I have excellent coaching from Marco, who has coached me along. I tweet, I have followers, I make mistakes, but I do all this. I learned, and I thought this was important, community engagement and digital engagement today go hand in hand. If you want to engage communities, do not rely on old-fashioned strategies. They might be really, you might have great affection for sitting down with people and having a cup of coffee, and that's great, but make sure you enhance that with a whole back end of digital work, and there were wonderful ideas over there. And then finally, I heard this, this tweet that came across again from Collaboration, is that if we want to do this kind of work, bottom-up, grassroots work, which is sustainable because citizens in low-income communities are themselves at the front of change, then we have to move from thinking about I to thinking about we. And I thought that was such a wise statement from Winnie to help us, to help me at least think about what are the 5 good things I learned. But those were my 5 good ideas. I'm going to challenge each one of you to come up with your own 5 good ideas and send them to me. Send them to Alejandra. We will put them together. For those of you who prefer a visual representation of what was discussed, we actually have a bit of a nice visual map that we will, how will we be sending it to you? I don't know, but Alejandra will manage. So this conference concludes a big project, a big journey that we have been on led by Alejandra and Vivian, which is called Building Blocks. But it is not the end of our journey in working in poor communities with residents at the front of making change. We have the luxury to think about what the future will look like. And you have the unique opportunity, since you've worked with us, you've been here, to give us your idea of what and how and when and with whom Maitree should carry on this kind of work in different ways. So as I said, this is not the end. You will all be receiving a toolkit filled with good ideas, successful practices, and strategies. Maitree never does things in half measures. We started today at 10 o'clock with a panel discussion on whether or not enabling permanent residents who are not citizens in Toronto to vote in local elections is a degradation of citizenship or an enhancement. Then we went on to this, and as I wish you goodbye, at 5:30, the next lot will arrive. You are welcome. Are they welcome, Alejandra? See, I do work for her. To stay. This is a fascinating discussion about another kind of leadership. And this is about leadership of diverse, visible minorities and underrepresented immigrants on agencies, boards, and commissions in the region. As you know, we are really, really big in making sure that the people who live in this city should also have a share of the influence and privilege that is enjoyed at boardrooms around the table. So that's what happens at 5:30. I want to wish you all, thank you very much. I want to thank you. I want to thank the Toronto Public Library for having this wonderful, affordable space finally in the City of Toronto to have a conference. For those of you who I am saying goodbye to, have a safe journey. Enjoy your first evening of spring. And for those who are staying, mix around, mingle, give us ideas. Thank you very, very much.